Hello everyone, this is MC Deck Discussions and I'm Abby Small, and today we're doing another deck discussion. We're starting on this page for a reason. The deck we're going to be discussing is this protection deck called W.A.L.L, Web Warriors and Living Legends. But I'm starting on this page because I wanted to contrast this build with the other ones. So these other two both had a heavy emphasis on card draw, and not that this one doesn't have card draw, but it's done for a different purpose. So both of these are meant to be that you're getting lots of card draw from all kinds of ways. So, in this deck here, right, we have Clear the Area for Justice, and eventually we get out Web of Life and Destiny, and then we have plenty of Web Warriors in here to take advantage of Web of Life and Destiny and get that really going. Little bit of Skilled Investigator too, right? So all great card draw elements in there. And then we have something similar when it comes to into the leadership deck. And in this one, even more of an emphasis on utilizing the Web of Life and Destiny. We're really meant to pop these allies in and out of the game regularly, especially taking advantage of Spider-Man 2099. Right, so that's meant to be a constant flow throughout both of these decks. So that's going to be change. That's going to change when it comes to the protection deck. So in our protection deck, we do still have Web of Life and Destiny, but it'll be used relatively rarely. Instead, our goal is to create a wall. So that wall is made up of two main pieces, right? There's the ally portion of it, or I guess really you can say three pieces. There's the ally portion of it, there's Silk herself, and then there is also the part with Ready for a Fight. And actually, investigative journalism is a part of that as well, right? So there's a wall to prevent the villain from scheming, from scheming out, right? Completing their main scheme. And so that wall is made up of our 3 copies of Ready for a Fight and our investigative journalism, which, by the way, is an all-star in this. This did not start off in the deck. I'll talk about the changes to the deck as it progressed in a little bit. But I was really impressed. This is the first deck, actually, of the 3 that I utilized investigative journalism, and it was just awesome. So we'll come back to that in a little bit. But those are meant to set up the wall. So unlike other decks where I have included Ready for a Fight, such as in She-Hulk's deck or Black Widow's deck, so in those decks, it's meant to be triggered regularly, getting you over to your hero side. But in this deck, it's meant to be a protection that just stays there in play. So a lot of times I might have 1 copy of Ready for a Fight out a great deal of the game and only be triggered once in a while, and then just get another copy on there again later on. So because in this case, I wanted Silk to stay in her alter ego as much as I could to start her turn on that side. So she has a major benefit to that. And we've talked about that in previous deck discussions. And that major benefit is her alter ego side, where she can draw 2 cards using her alter ego action, right? Which is really helped and to be triggered by her her support, Albert Moon, right? So Albert Moon can tuck the top card of the encounter deck under Cindy Moon and or heal Cindy Moon, but he's meant to be the thing that guarantees that she'll have a card to discard. Of course, she'll get them other ways too, just like in other decks. All right, so let's talk about what that wall is made up of, and then we'll go ahead and talk about what the other elements of this deck are to facilitate creating that wall in a relatively rapid way, right? So our 3 allies that make up the wall are these 3 down here. So there's Scarlet Spider, who's basically our protective character. He's not really meant to be thwarting or attacking except in an emergency or maybe at the very end of the game, right? So he's really here for his ability because he has 5 health. And he is, of course, a Web Warrior and has this interrupt when another Web Warrior character would take any amount of damage. Scarlet Spider takes that damage instead. So you can use that for any of those Web Warrior characters, whether it's Silk or one of the other allies. And then we also have Spider-Man Peter Parker, who's been a key element in all of the decks, and I don't see why he wouldn't ever be. All right, and so he has his awesome response where after Spider-Man attacks or thwarts, choose another Web Warrior character, ready that character. So Scarlet Spider, one of their main jobs, Scarlet Spider's main jobs, Ben Reilly here, is to keep Spider-Man Peter Parker in play. And he's meant to be kind of an emergency to help keep Spider UK in play as well. So Spider UK is critical. His job in the wall is to be able to keep the minions clear. So defending against minions and just destroying them as they attack. So, and that's because he has not because of his attack or thwart, right? He has 2 attack and 1 thwart, 2 consequential, by the way, on that attack. But he has this health of 5, and of course he's a Web Warrior and has this interrupt. When Spider UK defends against an attack, deal damage to the attacking enemy equal to the number of Web Warrior cards you control. For those who may not be familiar with this, because it's an interrupt, he does his damage prior to the minion doing their damage. So if he can defeat that minion when he defends, they never get to deal their damage. So that ends up being just the way that he ends up crushing those minions. And you can get, in this deck, you can get up to 5 Web Warrior cards. So notice it says equal to the number of Web Warrior cards you control. So you have Silk, who's a Web Warrior. Then you have this wall that we're forming between Scarlet Spider, Spider-Man, Peter Parker, and Spider UK. But in addition to that, we also have Web of Life and Destiny. So once that entire piece of the kit is out, then Spider UK is dealing 5 damage. If one of them is missing, he can be dealing 4 damage. And so the goal is typically not to actually, for the most part, not to defeat the minions during your turn, but on the villain's turn. Although, Silk does, of course, have benefits in defeating minions on her turn, so she'll do that at times because, of course, she can then, if she defeats a minion, she can then tuck them under her with her Silk sensibility, right? So we do sacrifice some possibilities here with Spider UK defeating some of those minions. However, I actually didn't find that I was lacking for I was lacking for cards underneath Silk. I actually found that I was getting as many, if not more, cards under Silk than in my other decks. And so let's continue on a little bit more for this wall. So another important element to the wall with Spider UK is Hangar Bay. So this support is one of the critical pieces. So this is part of the kit that you're wanting to get together, right? You have max 1 per player. It only costs 1 cost support, location, and it has this response after an ally defends against an attack and is not defeated, exhaust this card, ready that ally. So this gives Spider UK the ability to actually defeat 2 minions in a row. So that is always fun. Most of the time it's just 1 because he's keeping it under control. But when we would have 2 minions out there at a time, he could just take care of them by himself. And I don't think I actually ever had more than 2 minions out in any of these games, right? I played 9 games altogether with my villains that I tested against. And you can see those villains here. We had, as usual, I do it in both standard and expert, and I have a house rule for expert for Claw to make him more consistently more challenging. And then Eunice, Ensab, and Noor, which is a version of Apocalypse, and then Magneto. So those were the tests that I did. And I actually went back and did an extra test with Eunice after I had made some changes to the deck because I found some cards that I initially wasn't using. Again, I'll come back to that in a little bit when we talk about the deck refinements. Okay? All right, so there's the first part of the wall, these 3 minions. So that's one of our goals, is to get those out. We also have 3 supports we want out. We've mentioned 2 of them already, Albert Moon, and we mentioned him from another one of the decks, but of course he's in her kit, and he is one of the keys there. So Albert Moon Hangar Bay that I mentioned already, and Web of Life and Destiny. So those 3 supports. And then there are 3 pieces to the upgrades, though you don't necessarily have to have, all of these in place before you're starting to make your move against the villain. But when the kit is complete, it also includes 3 cards here. The most important, or I should say the first one I'm typically wanting to get out, would be Organic Webbing, right? Her 2-cost upgrade that gives her +1 thwart. So that's why that's one of the reasons why we want it out there right away. But also because it has the hero action, exhaust Organic Webbing and discard a card tucked under Silk, then you can ready Silk. And then she gains the aerial trait, not important in this deck. Just the readying is what's important. So that's the first one that's important. And then we do also care about Spider Claws and Spider Reflexes. In this deck, the first priority would be Spider Reflexes over Spider Claws. We care about Spider Claws eventually getting out, but Spider Reflexes is usually more important early on. And the main reason for that has to do with that our goal is typically to defend using Spider UK against the minions, but we're going to more likely defend with Silk against the villain. And so that's why we have Unflappable in here. And that's what Spider Reflexes helps to contribute to. And Spider Reflexes is the reason why I didn't have a lack of cards showing up under Silk. So let's look at Spider Reflexes. I haven't really emphasized this card as much in the other decks. Has this Hero Interrupt. It's a superpower, is its trait. And when Silk defends, exhaust Spider Reflexes. For this attack, right? So you use this when you're getting attacked. She gets +1 defense for each card tucked under her from the same encounter set as the attacking enemy, which is important. But just as important, maybe if not more so, is that after this attack, tuck the top card of the encounter discard pile under Silk. And that's the reason why in this deck we were having no lack of cards being tucked under Silk, was because of when we're beginning to use Spider Reflexes regularly. All right, so that's the kit, right? So we have our 3 Web Warriors, we have our 3 supports, and then we have our 3 upgrades. So the goal of the rest of the deck, the card draw in this deck, is to get that kit set up and then go for victory, right? And Spider UK, by the way, we can, of course, use him against the villain, but I would typically save that for most of the time. I would save that for near the end of the game when we're looking to push for our victory. All right. So because that 5 damage or maybe 4 damage sometimes is still considerable. And at that point, then we can often be okay with him coming out of the game and getting you card draw from Web of Life and Destiny. Maybe that occurring also with Scarlet Spider from defending or from taking the damage instead, and then causing you to draw a card, and Spider-Man Peter Parker causing you to draw a card. So a lot of times at the end of the game is finally when the Web of Life and Destiny would tend to be triggered the most. Okay, but it might be triggered early on, say by Ghost Spider. So the nice thing about Ghost Spider, so now we're going to talk about the other elements of card draw here, right? So since we're already talking about Web of Life and Destiny, early on we might get it to trigger because of Ghost Spider typically. Maybe. It depends on if Ghost Spider shows up. It might be that I'd use Ghost Spider late in the game, but if Ghost Spider is basically one of our first ones to come out, then she's really nice because when she exits with Web of Life and Destiny, sure, you're going to draw a card, but she also has the ability to, with her interrupt, when Ghost Spider leaves play, search your deck for an identity-specific event and add it to your hand. So that's essentially like another piece of card draw, right? So she can contribute. Then we have Moon Girl that can contribute in the usual way, and we do have, quite a few tech cards in here. Mental resource cards. If we look at, actually, we can't see it in this view. But we have that. We have more mental resource cards than any other type of card in here. And then our second most of the physical resource cards, by the way, because we do want to make sure we can get ready for a fight out. And the only resource generator we have is Ingenuity, which only generates a mental resource. So we do have to have those physical resources to get ready for a fight out. And like I said, we don't need a lot, but when we want ready for a fight out, we need to be able to get it out there. All right. So more card draw, of course, from Nick Fury. He can potentially draw 3 cards. Nick Fury Sr. can potentially draw 2 cards, or or get rid of 3 threat from a scheme and help keep that under control. All right. So those are elements of card draw. In addition, we have Face the Past, right, which allows you to. It's a 0-cost event. Search the encounter deck, discard pile, and set aside area for your nemesis minion and reveal it. Ready your hero and draw 3 cards. You cannot attack the villain this phase, but we don't really care about that. This card is all about helping us with setup, and then you'll remove this card from the game. All right, and then the other couple of pieces, one piece we already mentioned was Albert Moon. Even though he doesn't directly give you card draw, he helps to ensure that Silk can give you card draw in her alter ego side, because he can help you tuck the top card of the encounter deck under Cindy Moon. And then we also have Unflappable, which is the card where you have max 1 per player. It costs 1, and it has this response: after you defend against an attack and then take no damage, exhaust Unflappable and draw a card. So all of those elements give us some card draw. Let me make sure there are no others. All right, yeah, that's it. And we mentioned Web of Life and Destiny has the potential for some of that early on, not normally much until the end of the game after that. All right, so that whole goal of all that card draw is to set up that kit that we mentioned before. So let's talk about some of the card refinement and the results. By the way, it was undefeated all 9 games, standard and expert against those 4 villains that I mentioned. Very strong deck, and very much does its job of creating that wall. And really, it's basically, you could consider it to be like multiple walls in essence. So let's look at some of those deck changes, because initially I had even more card draw in here, and that was from, I had 3 copies of Taunt. And so it was kind of serving its purpose, but not really, right? So the whole purpose in Taunt was for that setup, right? So it was meant to be that if I got Taunt early in the game was when I was likely to use it. And then I was hoping I would also use it later in the game. But what I found was I was hardly ever using Taunt. Yes, once in a while I would use it at the beginning of the game to set things up, but it would also cause kind of dangerous situations that could be somewhat difficult to deal with. And most of the time I would have one of these other cards in hand anyway and just play one of those. And then later on in the game, the only thing Taunt was really doing for me was helping me to play ready for a fight, because Taunt also has a physical resource, right? If you look at the resource there, right, it says a cost of 1 and a physical resource. It's an event, and it makes the villain attack you. Has a hero action, the villain attacks you, and then other characters cannot defend against this attack, so only you can, your hero can, and then you draw 3 cards. Right? And so I found that I was sometimes using it at the beginning of the game, but it was causing, like I said, a little bit more dangerous situations. And at the rest of the game, I was really only using it to play ready for a fight. And then also, even later, I removed superpower training and build support. So those are both player side schemes. And I found I just wasn't playing them. I had my hands full enough with this deck trying to take control the threat that was out there as it was. And so it just wasn't really conducive to getting those cards out, paying for them, right? They cost 1, so they don't cost much, but paying for them and then waiting a while to even trigger them. And in a lot of games, never triggering them. A lot of times they were just out there accumulating even more threat on them. And I just ignored them and let them do it. So eventually I got rid of them. And then, so those 5 cards were removed. So 3 copies of Taunt, and then those 2 cards. And here's what we replaced them with. And I already mentioned one of those cards that I said, which I'm really glad that I did, because I hadn't played this card up to this time, right? And that was Investigative Journalism. So let's go ahead and take a look at that card now in detail. So that's a 2-cost event, and it's a skill card, and it's a team up. So Cindy Moon and Peter Parker. So this, I can only play this in my case as a solo player when I had Peter Parker out in play. And then it's an alter ego interrupt. When an enemy would scheme, cancel that activation and confuse that enemy. I use this card just about every time it came into play, came into my hand. Once Peter Parker was in, we want to regularly go to alter ego side with Silk. So this card was really great. And on top of that, it has a wild resource, which is really nice because now it can help facilitate playing Moon Girl and getting that card draw because it can act as a mental resource, or it can be used to get ready for a fight out. So in it has those multiple uses even before I can start using it when Spider-Man Peter Parker is not yet in play. It has the ability to help facilitate those other cards being played. And then we also have Deadpool and render medical aid. So Deadpool's purpose is, again, this is an early use. So when I made these substitutes, I purposefully chose, I wanted cards that had wild resources because it's very frustrating to have Ready for a Fight or Moon Girl and not have the as many mental resources as you want, or as many, or the physical resource that you want. And so when I substituted out those other cards, I brought in those two wilds, right? So we have investigative journalism and Deadpool. So Deadpool's main purpose really is to be a wild resource. However, when Deadpool shows up early in the game as one of my early allies, Deadpool is a solid ally. Only costs 3, and we have 2 copies of power in all of us, so that can help facilitate playing Deadpool since he's a basic card. He has 2 attack, 2 thwart, 3 health. Has this forced interrupt when Deadpool would be defeated by consequential damage. Heal 3 damage from him instead. Add an acceleration token to the main scheme. That I never made happen. I didn't want the acceleration token to happen. He was really just out there early on to attack and thwart, which he does very well in both cases, and then go ahead and sacrifice himself by defending after that. Or if we happen, this never happened, but if I had had render medical aid, it could have healed him too. But that was meant to be played later. And I didn't really need to keep Deadpool out longer since I was getting the card draw I needed to get my kit out. So he wasn't meant to stay out there for very long. So that was a great addition, especially with him having that wild, so he could continue to be used effectively throughout the rest of the game, even when I wasn't playing him. And then the last card, the last card. So my original deck, so you might notice this adds up to 5 cards. My original deck had 42 cards, and this is more slim and trim. It's down to the minimum of 40. And so those 5 that I removed, I only replaced with 3 other cards. And that last one was render medical aid. And what made this one different than those other cards is the fact that I could get it out for a cost of 0 and just kind of ping off some threat here and there when I wanted to, and then be able to heal a total of 5, right? So when defeated, each player heals a total of 5 damage from among the characters they control. Plus it has a victory on it, so it ends up being removed, and the deck is even thinner after that. And it's thinner to begin with just as soon as you play it. So that 0 cost makes it easy to just throw it out there when you want. Plus it's a mental resource, so early on in the game it can be used to facilitate Moon Girl's play and card draw. So those were the changes, and those worked out really well because render medical aid, my goal was to try to keep these 3 cards out. Basically when they came out, I wanted them out pretty much the rest of the game until the end of the game when I would start to let them be defeated in order to trigger the Web of Life and Destiny and get that extra card draw, because then we would get our blast of damage at the end, right? So I would get whatever damage was needed was just there. I had multiple times when I would be in the second phase, this second version of the villain, going into the third version of the villain, and the third version would have a tough status on it. So we'd be able to take care of, finishing off the second version of the villain, flipping to the third, and then Silk with having spider claws out, right? She would then be able to attack, slice right through that tough, deal her damage, and then everybody would just start, these cards would just start, they would start attacking and leaving, giving us more card draw, getting plenty of her main attack, right? Her big attack, which is Swinging Silk Kick, right? Which deals 7 damage to an enemy. But I was getting plenty of cards tucked under Silk to be able to typically discard, the card from the correct encounter set to deal the 2 additional damage and gain overkill. Once in a while, I would actually have to defeat a minion as well and do the overkill. But that was pretty rare, actually. Most of the time, these went right to the villain's face because Spider UK was just taking care of those minions left and right. Here and there, so there were two ways the villain was often set up for that final bit of damage, by the way. So sometimes just before I would go for that final push, Spider UK, I would use Spider UK to defend and deal 4 or 5 damage to the villain. Or there were times when I didn't have quite enough damage to finish off the villain and knew I didn't need to, because I would just leave Spider UK out, and then I would have Silk and one other card, and I knew I just needed 2 or 3 points of damage, maybe 4 sometimes, to finish off the villain. And I knew as soon as the villain attacked on the next turn, I would defend with Spider UK and finish him off with his interrupt. So it was very cool the way this deck worked out, and I really loved the way it worked differently than the other decks. And, the leadership deck was that real extreme of using Web of Life and Destiny, and to have this minimize the use of Web of Life and Destiny, at least until the end of the game, and make it based on this whole idea of setting up this wall that the villain just can't get through, and then smashing the villain in the face at the end. Or you might say slicing the face and then smashing him. So very cool deck. Hope some people get a chance to try it, or that inspires some of your own builds. I can definitely imagine other builds related to this that could be fun. So if you have any creative builds, I'd love to hear them. And please like and subscribe if you appreciate this type of content. And please comment in the comments. Write some comments. I love chatting with people there. All right. Have a good one, everybody.